I'm seeing increasing amounts of evidence of SoFi having potentially closed a massive deal with either Citibank or US Bank, ticker symbol USB. In this video, I'm going to be sharing all of the speculation and all the hints that I've been seeing as to what makes me feel that SoFi could have already closed the deal with one of these institutions. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so basically, all of this started on Monday when Chris Lapointe said we did a large POC, proof of concept, with a top 5 US bank. Just that sentence alone sparked a whole ton of research from my end, from the entire SoFi retail investment community. The fact of the matter is that there's only a very limited list of banks that it could be. The top 5 banks in America by asset size are number one, JP Morgan, number two, Bank of America, number three, Wells Fargo, number four, Citibank, and number five, US Bank, ticker symbol USB. I basically made a post and I said, well, just logically speaking, it doesn't make sense for Lapointe to say top 5 bank when it's really JP Morgan Chase or Wells Fargo. He would have just said a top 3 bank to further narrow it down. So really, if we take that assumption one step further, it really leaves two options. Number one is Citibank, and number two is US Bank. And this is essentially a fork in the road. And I made several posts over the past couple of days around both of these options. Chris Lapointe did say in the fireside chat that this POC had already been completed, right? It was in the past tense. We did a large POC. Now we're doing or in the progress of we completed the POC. And so aside from all of this speculation, the question that remains for retail investors is, was this POC successful? Did this POC lead to a closed deal, a signed contract with a client? Or is this essentially a nothing burger? And if it was successful, when are these accounts going to be migrating over? Personally, I think that it was successful. And the reason why is because they've been teasing this out for quite a while. And Chris Lapointe was under no obligation to share that they had completed this POC. The host basically asked them to share some more details around banking clients specifically. I mean, he talked about fintech companies. He talked about large financial institutions. He was really under no obligation to tell us it was a top 5 bank. He could say, we're working with some of the top banks in the US. And that objection alone is vague and ambiguous enough to move on to another topic. But he chose to say top 5 bank. Now, there was no way he would have done that if this thing was a lost deal. If they did the POC and it didn't result in a deal, he knows that every word that he says is going to be scrutinized by the market, is essentially going to be studied by retail investors and analysts alike, and assumptions are going to form as a result of that. These executives are very careful with the words they say. They're very careful with all of the communications that they have externally because of situations like this, because of speculations like this. So that's number one. And then the second argument of, if this was already a done deal, why wouldn't he just announce it in the moment? Well, because it's not the forum for that announcement, right? SoFi wants to release news at their own leisure, at their own cadence, in their own time. They're not going to be bullied essentially by any host of a fireside to essentially disclose company news when they don't have a press release handy, when they don't have a talk track handy, when they don't have a CNBC interview lined up. They want to have the proper preparation when announcing these things. And so this is why I think that the deal was successful, but the entire speculation portion of this video hinges on this deal being successful. It's essentially saying we've completed the POC and the POC resulted in a client because otherwise we wouldn't even mention it. And here's who we can expect from the clients. Now, essentially one day after this fireside, yesterday on Tuesday, I made 2 posts and they look very similar. One of them is all of the arguments for US Bank to be the secret client that they're working with. And the other one is all of the clients for Citigroup. Let's start first with Citigroup. I made this post first, and I basically used the same argument to say, well, if Lapointe is saying top 5 bank, then it must be number 4 or number 5. It shouldn't be number 1, 2, or 3, because otherwise he would have said top 3. Citigroup was a previous client of Technisys in Latin America. They already have connections to SoFi because they've already worked with Technisys in the past. Assuming for a moment that it is Citigroup, Citi has roughly 200 million accounts globally. This is by and far larger than any of the other banks on this chart because for Citi, it's looking at global accounts as opposed to just North American or US accounts. This would be absolutely massive for Galileo because if we assume that these accounts are going to migrate over, Galileo's total accounts to date as of Q4 are 145 million accounts. If we add 200 million on top of that, that means that Galileo's total accounts would more than double off of just this one client deal alone, which would be absolutely insane if you really think about it from that perspective. Now, there's a lot of ifs in that statement. It's if Citi actually has 200 million accounts and this is not outdated chart. Number 2 is if Citi actually migrates all of these global accounts over, which probably they're going to start with a certain geography in a certain jurisdiction, and they're going to start much slower. And obviously, if it is Citi, in fact. Now, a little bit later that day, I made a sister post around whether US Bank could be the secret banking client. And many of the points here were brought up by followers on the speculation from the Citigroup post. Speculation started around USB because Derek White, the Galileo CEO, was in fact US Bank's chief digital officer in 2019 to 2020. He moved away from USB in 2020, where he went to Google and then later to Galileo. I also went through US Bank's Q4 earnings presentation. There's a slide there that highlights their growth plans for 2024, and it notes investments in digitization and cloud migration. This is actually a recurring theme for US Bank. They want to become more digitized and move more into that cloud banking specifically. Per our chart here, USB has around 11 million accounts. It could definitely be USB. They're the fifth largest bank in the US. And the follower actually highlighted this image from their client portal, which is essentially a disclaimer that US Bank is showing to their users that there's going to be back-end changes coming soon. The update reads that it's coming soon. It says online banking will soon be the same on every device. This mobile site will change, but the way you bank will still stay the same. When the time comes, we'll provide support to help you find your way around. So essentially, we know that there's going to be some back-end changes coming from US Bank, and we know that they're moving towards a more digitized cloud banking solution. And we know that Derek White, Galileo CEO, was previously at US Bank. One thing I noted in this post was that when Chris Lapointe talked about the POC having been complete, he mentioned that it was complete, but he didn't mention when this was complete. And in fact, this POC could have been complete months prior to this announcement, and the integration work with US Bank could be well underway, because some people were commenting on the timeline saying that this is really quick from the announcement until now. It's like, yeah, they could have been sitting on this announcement for months, similar to what I speculate is the NBA announcement, right? They announced that, and then immediately they had all the marketing materials and they were so prepared for it. It's probably because it's been in the works for quite a while beforehand. Now, what happened was both of these posts received comments and people independently doing their own research. Let's start with USB. Another connection was made between SoFi and US Bank, and that connection was Charles Schwartz, which is the senior vice president at Galileo. Previously, this gentleman was the chief digital officer at US Bank for 2 years. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, wasn't that Derek White? Yeah, it was Derek White. But when Derek White left to go join Google, this guy, Charles Schwartz, took his spot right after. And then when Derek White left Google to go to Galileo, he brought Charles Schwartz with him in October of 2022. And since October of 2022, Charles Schwartz has been working as a senior vice president at Galileo. He is the senior vice president of customer success for North America. So there's lots of connections between Galileo and USB. And this is probably because Derek White, after he moved over to Galileo, he just poached a lot of the top talent away from US Bank, and now they're working at Galileo. So obviously there's connections there, especially on the digital side. So Derek White was on the digital side, the chief digital officer. Charles Schwartz was the chief digital officer, again, of US Bank. And all of a sudden, Galileo could potentially be the digital partner of US Bank. So there's a lot of connections to be made there. However, I think the final nail in the coffin from the Citibank point of view is coming from Bender 9000, who earlier today posted that the tech platform Domain Name Service Records named Citi as the proof of concept client starting in late 2022 and early 2023. The records literally include POC and Citibank. Citi POC has seemingly been in the works since late 2022, Bender reports. This is also around the time that SoFi management began teasing the test in commentary. The proof of concept keyword came after the initial investor tease. We've heard both the terms top 10 and top 5 used in reference to POCs with the tech platform. It's less clear if these both refer to Citi or if it is Citi and a secondary major firm. We know that Bender 9000 has made pretty much spot on accurate analysis for every SoFi insider post or product update or speculation, and there's no reason to start doubting him now. It actually says in the DNS records stating Citigroup as the POC client. So obviously my confidence is increasing in Citigroup having been that secret banking client of SoFi. This is all but confirmed, obviously unofficial as nothing has been officially announced by the company. But as per Bender's post, per the DNS records of the tech platform, Citigroup and POC are hand in hand. And if this is correct, this has been in the works since late 2022. So it's very possible that SoFi has all of these nuggets of information that they've been sitting on for years, and the market has been seemingly oblivious, downgrading the stock, shorting the stock, which short interest is at an all-time high again. All the while, SoFi has been potentially working with some of the top financial institutions in the world. I just wanted to share that post. Obviously, speculation, as nothing has been officially announced yet. But for US Bank, we have all of these connections in the form of their digitization efforts, in the form of their connections between Derek White and Charles Schwartz with USB, and with regards to USB wanting to modernize and saying something is coming soon from backend changes. And if we pivot over to Citibank, we have a clear-cut case of Citigroup being in the technology platform's DNS records with POC attached. So it's essentially, in my mind, all but confirmed. It's not official, but Citigroup looks to be the secret client that SoFi has been working with. Right now, this is the Fundamentals Investing podcast. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening.